So today we will be discussing attitude and social cognition. Now, both attitude and social cognition are a part of, or both of these topics come under the topic or come under the subfield of social psychology. So first we need to understand what is social psychology. It is the branch of psychology that investigates how social environment and other people affect an individual's behavior. So हमारे आसपास का environment and the people who are around us, how they change our behavior, how they change our thought process, how they affect our emotions, all of this comes under the stream of social psychology. Now, it is a known fact that in our life, we meet new people almost every day. If not every day, then we end up meeting new people every now and then, right? And all of these people, they some or the other way affect us. Okay, they have an impact on us. Also, when we meet new people, we end up forming some impressions about them and assign causes to their behavior. ठीक है, जब भी हम किसी नए पर्सन से मिलते हैं, हम उसके बारे में एक इम्प्रेशन फॉर्म करते हैं. दिस इम्प्रेशन माइट बी अ जजमेंट और माइट नॉट बी अ जजमेंट, बट वी एंड अप मेकिंग इम्प्रेशंस अबाउट पीपल. लाइक इफ आई एम टेकिंग योर क्लास टुडे, आपके भी दिमाग में मेरा कोई एक इम्प्रेशन बाय द एंड ऑफ क्लास बन जाएगा, राइट? सो वी एंड अप मेकिंग आवर इम्प्रेशंस अबाउट द पीपल वी मीट. Along with that, whether or not we know a person intimately or not, we end up assigning causes to their behavior. For example, say if you're walking down the street and you see a person fighting with some other person, you might end up thinking कि यार ये क्यों लड़ रहे हैं, शायद दोनों का एक्सीडेंट हो गया होगा. अगर ए और बी दो लोग हैं तो आपने प्रॉबेबली सोचा होगा कि शायद ए की गलती होगी, एक्सीडेंट हो गया होगा, इसलिए बी पर्सन ए को डांट रहा है या उस पर चिल्ला रहा है. सो वी एंड अप असाइनिंग कॉजेस बेस्ड ऑन हाउ पीपल आर बिहेविंग विद ईच अदर और हाउ दे आर बिहेविंग विद अस. ठीक है, इट इज अ नॉर्मल ह्यूमन नेचर. Also, we form, as I said, we form impression or attitude about various events, topics and things also. जरूरी नहीं है हम अपना impression या attitude लोगों को लेकर ही बनाए.
Ma'am,
Yes.
a student just texted in the class that can you please use English only because I don't understand other language.
Okay. All right. All right. So as I was saying, I was giving an example of how we end up assigning causes to our behavior. So I gave the example that when you're walking down the street, right, and you see two people fighting with each other, you might think that why are they fighting? Then you might end up assuming that if there are two people A and B who are fighting with each other, you might end up assuming that there might have been an accident and it might have been the fault of A because of which B is shouting on A, right? So it is a normal human nature that we end up assigning causes to the behavior that other people have with each other or with us, right? Now, along with that, it is not just people about whom we make our impressions or attitudes. It is also about the events that are happening around us, the topics that we see on media or news or around us, and about things also. For example, you might have a certain view about sleep cycle, or you might have a certain opinion about what should be a person's eating habit, right? So it is not just people about whom we form impressions, it can be about anything. Now, when you see this word attitude, in psychology, this word attitude typically means our view about something, right? So if I ask you what is your attitude about a certain political party, I am asking your view about that political party, right? Here attitude is not that typical attitude jo hum that the word that we use in everyday sentences, that this girl has a lot of attitude or this guy has a lot of attitude. It is not that. In psychology, when we use the word attitude, we are talking about your view about a certain topic, about a certain event, about someone or about anything. All right. our own behavior also gets influenced by the society we live in, the people we are surrounded by, and the events happening around us, right? So, whatever is happening around us, whatever society or culture we are a part of, or whatever people we are surrounded by, our behavior, our thoughts, our emotions, everything is influenced by these things, right? Event can be any event, like the suicide of any famous actor which just happened, right? Or it can be because of COVID. So whatever event is happening around us, it influences our behavior, our thought process in certain way. Explaining the processes that lie behind these behaviors is a complex matter. Okay, now obviously, to understand the processes behind a certain behavior, which is basically explaining why a particular behavior happened or why someone did something. Okay, this is a very complex matter, because when we talk about human behavior, it is affected by a lot of different factors. It can be because of conditioning, it can be because of your upbringing, it can be because of your personality, it can be because of your hormones, anything for that matter. Right? So there are a lot of factors that are affecting our behavior, and assigning causes to these behaviors, that why a certain behavior is happening, it is a very complex matter. And this particularly, that why something is happening, why a particular behavior is happening, is one of the major aims of social psychology. Now, explaining social behavior. Social psychology deals with all the behavior that takes place in the presence of others. Any behavior that is happening or that is influenced by the presence of other people around us is comes under the stream of social psychology. The presence of others can vary our behavior as per the situation that we are in. For example, giving a speech in front of a lot of people. The performance of some people may get influenced by the imagined presence of audience too. Here, the word imagined carries the weight. See, even when you are in your room, you're preparing for a speech. Now, if you start imagining that, what if I'm surrounded by a lot of people, and you start preparing that speech with that thought, with that visual in your mind that you're surrounded by a lot of people, you might get nervous, just like you would have been if there were actually people around you, right? So sometimes even the imagined presence of others can influence our behavior. Social psychologists examine various forms of social behavior and try to explain their basis, the reasons or causes behind it. So, what is the function of social psychologists? That they examine the social behavior. By social behavior, we mean behavior that is happening in the presence of others, and we try to assign causes to these behaviors, which is basically explaining the basis of it and the reasons or causes behind it. Now we have three terms related to this. Okay, these all are interrelated terms: attitudes, impression formation, and attribution. Okay, these are three terms that are interrelated to each other. We'll discuss one of each of these individually. Attitudes, as I said earlier also, attitude in social psychology typically means your view about something. ठीक है, whatever view you have about people, about a certain person, about different issues that are happening around you, the events that are happening in your life, your view about all of these is your attitude. Give me 1 minute, okay? Okay, let's continue. So I was saying that attitude typically means our view about something. Now comes the second term, which is impression formation. Impression formation is that as soon as we meet someone, we make inferences about their personal qualities. This inference about the personal quality of someone is impression formation. Like if you meet someone, you might make an impression that this person has a really good has really good communication skills, or you may think or you may find you may form an impression that this person dresses very nicely. All right, so whatever inferences we make about the personal qualities of a person is known as impression formation. Now, along with this, we also try to find the causes behind people's behavior in different social contexts. That is, why people behave in the way they do. This is known as attribution. So, when you're trying to assign causes behind a person's behavior, when you're trying to find the basis of it, or understanding the reasons behind it, that is known as attribution, right? So, a person's, say, if you're observing your sister or your brother, and you saw that his or her behavior is very different with their friends, and completely different when he or she is with you or with your mother, right? So when you're trying to assign causes that why this behavior is changing in these different social contexts, what you're actually engaging in is known as attribution. All right, so we have three terms: attitudes, which are our views about something; impression formation, which is the inferences that we make about a person's qualities; and attribution, where we try to assign causes to a certain behavior in a certain specific social context. Are these three terms clear? Any doubts, any questions regarding this?
No, ma'am.
All right. Now comes the fourth term, social cognition. Forming the attitude, impression formation, as well as attribution are all mental activities. As we gather the information about the social world and interpret it, and this collectively is known as social cognition. See, in psychology, I hope that you all are aware about the term cognition. In psychology, cognition specifically mean any kind of mental act, any kind of mental activity, which includes thinking, decision making, problem solving, anything that requires a certain mental activity is cognition. Now, when these mental activities are happening in a social context, then that is known as social cognition. And because attitude, impression formation, and attribution, all of these are mental activities in the context of a social environment, hence, these three terms are collectively or they collectively come under the umbrella term of social cognition. Now comes another term known as schema. Now, our social cognition is basically activated by schemas. What are schemas? Schemas are cognitive frameworks or concepts with the help of which okay. Yeah, so schemas are cognitive frameworks or concepts with the help of which we organize and interpret information. So whenever a new information comes to us, or we get aware about a new information, it certainly comes under a certain category. Like if you're getting a information about something that has about a fight that is happening between the farmers and the government, it certainly comes under the concept of either politics or agriculture or your country, right? So you will put it into these categories. Now our mind has a certain type of functioning where we end up organizing all the information that comes to us, and we organize it in the form of a cognitive framework, right? So for example, if you have a certain schema of birds, it might be related to the schema of birds is any animal, any egg laying animal that has a beak, that has wings, that has talons, and that has feathers, and can maybe fly, is a bird. So whenever you see a certain animal that can fly, that has feathers, that has a beak, you will put it into your cognitive framework of birds, right? So this is how schemas work. It is a mental representation of the categories that are there in your mind. Now, obviously, we cannot see cognitive processes. You cannot see what one is thinking about, or or whether someone is thinking about something. You cannot see decision making, and you cannot see what impressions they are making. But we can certainly try to understand these cognitive processes based on the behavior of the person. Why? Because behavior is something that we can observe, and on the basis of this behavior, we can try to understand the cognitive processes of that person. So if a certain person is not behaving properly with a homosexual person, you might infer from his or her behavior that this person has a prejudice or a stereotype towards LGBTQ community or homosexuals, right? So, on the basis of behavior, we can infer the cognitive processes, but we cannot understand, we cannot see cognitive processes directly. Indirectly, you can infer it through the help of behavior. Now, nature and components of attitudes. Opinion. What is opinion? Now, as I said, that attitude typically means view. It might have come to your mind that even opinion is that opinion. So are opinion and attitude synonymous? So basically, opinion is also a view or judgment, right? It is again just like attitude, it is also a view or a judgment that we form about something, but it might not, sorry, it might not necessarily be based on fact or knowledge. Your view or judgment about anything and everything is your opinion. Now, how is this different from attitude? See, there are some topics around us that are not very important to us. They don't have a emotional meaning attached to it. Because of this, whether others agree or disagree with our opinion about these concepts, it doesn't matter to us. Okay? So your opinion about a table, or what is the right configuration of a table, it is not very important to you, and it might have no emotional meaning attached to it, right? So whether other people agree on your opinion about a table or not, it wouldn't matter to you. It is an opinion. But there are some other topics that are important to us, and they have an emotional meaning attached to it. In these cases, our others' agreement to our opinion becomes important to us. And such topics where others' opinion matter to us, it matters to us that they agree to us on these things. When something has an emotional meaning attached to it for us, particularly for ourselves, that particular opinion becomes an attitude. All right. So all opinions are not attitudes, but all attitudes are opinions. Is this clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. This clarifies that these kind of opinions are not just thoughts. They rather have a emotional as well as a behavioral component attached to it. Now, all opinions are cognitive in nature. Sorry, cognitive in nature. But when along with this cognitive aspect, an emotional aspect is attached, and obviously if emotional meaning is attached to it, our behavior also changes with that emotional aspect. So along with emotional, behavioral component is also added. Then this opinion changes into an attitude. All right. And this is the major difference between attitude and opinions. Opinions are only opinions may have all cognitive, emotional, and behavioral components, but attitude has to have all these three components. So opinions like these that have a behavioral and emotional aspect attached to it, they do not remain opinions merely, they become our attitude. Hence, attitude is firstly a state of mind or a set of views or thoughts. Secondly, it is regarding some specific topic. This topic is known as attitude object, and these attitudes have a evaluative feature in the sense that we may either have a positive attitude towards something or a negative attitude towards something, or it might have a neutral quality. We all are aware about the ABC triad, right? So attitudes also have these ABC triad, where A stands for affective aspects, B stands for behavioral aspects, and C stands for cognitive aspects. Usually, the attitude starts with the thought component. Because it starts with the thought components, it initiates a emotion inside us, and because we feel emotional about a certain topic, we end up behaving incongruent in congruence to this emotional component. So this is an example. This girl is saying that I refuse to be friends with Southerners. Don't you think they are horrible? So her thinking that Southerners are horrible is the thought component, or you can say the cognitive component. Now, because she thinks that Southerners are horrible, she might have a hate or disgust emotion attached to it, because she thinks they are horrible, right? So this hate or disgust that she feels when she is with Southerners is the emotional component. And because of these emotions, whatever emotion is attached to it, she decides to do this, that she refuses to be friends with those people. So this will be your behavioral component. All right. So it usually starts with the thought, which in turn initiates your emotion, and this emotion brings out the behavioral component. Any questions till now?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Anyone else? Any questions, any doubts?
No, ma'am.
Oh,
No, ma'am.
all right. Now, attitudes in itself, in themselves, they are not behavior. They are themselves not behavior. They are on the thought level, but they represent a tendency to behave in a certain way or act in a certain way. All right. So these attitudes in themselves are at the thought level, but they initiate a certain behavior. Because of this, in an attitude in itself an attitude in itself is unobservable from outside. You cannot observe the attitude itself, but you can infer the attitude based on the person's behavior. Now, there are two topics or two terms that are very closely related to this topic of attitude. These are known as beliefs and values. Now, both beliefs and values, they arise from attitude only. All right. But a lot of people think that beliefs and values are one and the same thing, but they are not. Now, beliefs are the cognitive component of attitude, right? As I said, attitude in themselves are at the thought level, but because they have three different components, all cognitive, emotional, and behavioral, all three components. So different names are assigned to them. Okay. So the name that is assigned to the cognitive component of attitude is known as belief. So the cognitive component of your attitude is your belief, and these lay the groundwork on which an attitude is based upon. An example can be your belief in God, your political ideology, or your belief in, say, the existence of aliens, your belief in artificial intelligence, etc. Right? Now comes values. Whenever you add a should or ought, or you can say must aspect to that belief, it becomes a value, right? So say if you have a belief in God, now adding to it, you add a must or a should aspect to it, that because I believe that God exists and God listens to our prayers, we should regularly pray. So we should regularly pray. So whenever a should, that this thing has to happen no matter what, whenever this should, must, or ought aspect is added to a belief, it becomes a value. For example, one should always be honest, because honesty is the best policy. So honesty is the best policy is the belief in itself. When this should aspect, that because honesty is the best policy, one should always be honest, this becomes a value. Now, values are formed when a particular belief or attitude becomes an inseparable part of the person's outlook on life. Whenever a belief becomes as strong, or an attitude becomes as strong, becomes so strong that you cannot separate it from how you view the world or how you perceive the world around you, it becomes a value. And because of that, it is easier to change beliefs, but it is difficult to change values. If you have a certain value in life, it will be very, very difficult to change it. But if you have a certain belief, it is, I'm not saying that it is very easy, but it is still easier to change as compared to values. As I said, this is not different, this is difficult. That values are difficult to change as compared to a belief or an attitude. Features of attitude. So there are 4 features of attitude: valence, extremeness, simplicity or complexity, and centrality. Now, valence typically means whether something is positive or something is negative. Okay, so the valence of an attitude tells us the positivity or negativity about it. It tells us whether an attitude is positive or negative. Whether you view something as positive or you view something as negative will be your valence. All right. Now, extremeness is basically how positive or how negative an attitude is. So, when I put a plus or a minus sign, I am talking about the valence. Now, if I add plus 5 or minus 7, this number indicates the extremeness or extremity of an attitude. The more extreme an attitude is, the more difficult it would be to change. All right. Then comes for example, say you have a positive attitude towards health. Okay. Now, extremeness would be basically trying to understand how extremely positive your behavior about good health is, right? How indulged you are in activities that maintain that good health. All right. um, the more you will be involved in activities that maintain a good health, the more extreme your attitude would be. All right. Next is simplicity or complexity. It can you can combine these two terms, simplicity or complexity, to say multiplexity also. It is one and the same thing. So this particular feature of attitude refers to how many attitudes are within a border attitude or attitude system, right? How many attitudes or how many topics are related to one particular attitude defines whether it is simple in nature or whether it is complex in nature. So for example, if I again take the example of table, your attitude about table or your attitude about, say, an apple, it is a simple attitude because there are not a lot of other attitudes that are related to this. But if I say health, there are a lot of attitudes that might be attached to it, like your sleeping patterns, your eating patterns, smoking, drinking, then emotional health, physical health, mental health, and many other things, right? So the more number of interrelated attitudes one particular attitude has, the more complex it will be. The lesser number of attitudes that are attached to a single attitude, more simpler it will be. All right. Fourth is centrality. Now, centrality is related to this. Centrality basically says that when I say, when I am using this diagram, I have put health in the middle and the other are dependent on what my attitude towards health is. If my attitude towards health is negative, I might have a positive attitude towards smoking, that yes, it is okay to smoke. I might have a positive attitude towards drinking also, that okay, drinking is okay, it's not a problem. I might have a negative attitude towards sleep, that it doesn't matter. What matters is that you sleep 6 to 8 hours. Now whether you sleep in the during the daytime or in the night time, it doesn't matter, right? So my attitude towards all of these will be dependent on this attitude towards health. So health is a central here, is a central attitude here, not a peripheral one, right? So centrality refers to the role of a particular attitude in the attitude system. This entire thing is the attitude system. Any attitude with a greater centrality would influence the other attitudes in the system. As I gave you the example, that my attitude towards health will define what my attitude towards all these peripheral attitude would be. See, if I have a very, very positive attitude towards health, that health is something that should be taken care of at every point of your life from every aspect. So I will not indulge in smoking. I might have a very negative attitude towards smoking, that smoking is injurious to health and nobody should actually indulge themselves in smoking habits. Why? Because it will affect your health. So my attitude towards health defines what my attitude towards smoking and drinking and sleeping and eating and junk food etc would be, right? So health is a central attitude here and all the other attitudes are peripheral. This is centrality, the fourth feature of attitude. Any questions till now?
No, ma'am.
All right, so they have given the same example. If an individual's attitude towards maintaining good health is positive, it would influence his attitudes towards sleep cycle, food habits, which means a negative attitude towards junk food and a positive attitude towards healthy food. Also a positive attitude towards maintaining a good sleep cycle, etc. Next topic is attitude formation and change, right? Here we will be discussing how a particular attitude is formed, and if, say, a maladaptive attitude has been formed, how can we change those attitudes? Now, attitudes towards different topics, things, events, and people form as we interact with others and become a part of our cognitive system. So while we start interacting with others, we learn a lot of things from them, right? We get exposure to different to a lot of information, to a lot of facts and figures. We get a lot of knowledge from others. Now this others might be other people also, it might be news also, it might be media also, it might be Google also, etc. ठीक है? So we get a lot of knowledge from the people around us or from our environment, and as we interact with these things in our environment, we end up forming attitudes about different topics, things, and people. And as soon as this attitude forms, it becomes a part of our cognitive system. So from where you can form an attitude, it might be you might learn some attitudes from your teachers. You may learn it based on your past experiences. It might be because of prejudice, it might be because of media, friends and peers, parents, neighbors, etc., your partner, etc. Attitudes are learned through one's own experiences. So sometimes we form attitudes based on our personal experiences also. Because of this, social psychologists mostly focus on attitude formation by learning. So because attitudes are formed through our experiences, if not experiences, we are forming it by interacting with others. So when we are interacting with others, again we are either it is happening based on observation or imitation, right, or conditioning. And if you see, all of these, observation, imitation, conditioning, etc., all of this comes under the aspect of learning. So because of this, social psychologists focus mostly on attitude formation by learning. The process of attitude formation. We can form attitudes or we can learn attitudes with the help of association, or you can learn attitudes by being rewarded or punished. What does this mean? If someone is learning attitudes by being rewarded or punished, what does it mean particularly?
Reinforcement.
Yeah, reinforcement comes under the topic of
Operant conditioning.
exactly operant conditioning. And association, association is anyone try to answer, even if you're wrong, it doesn't matter.
Classical conditioning.
Exactly. Why?
Because I remember Pavlov did it with his dogs. So
Yeah, so
that's
basically a neutral stimulus is associated with a unconditioned stimulus, making it a conditioned stimulus, and we learn behavior. We start behaving towards that conditioned stimulus, or a stimulus that was neutral for us in the beginning, right? So association all comes under the concept of classical conditioning. So you can learn attitudes by association, or by being reinforced or punished, rewarded or punished, or you can learn attitudes by modeling, that is observing others. You may also learn attitudes through group or cultural norms, right? Because we live in a certain society, we are social animals, and we end up learning a lot of things from the culture or from the society that we live in. And the last would be that sometimes we learn attitudes through exposure to information. Here comes your media influences, um, or interaction with others, etc. Learning attitudes by association. Have you ever felt that you started liking a subject because of your teacher? Because you certainly, have a certain liking towards a teacher, or you like the way that that teacher teaches, so you start liking that subject also. You gain interest in that subject also, because the teacher teaches it in a certain way, right? So what is happening here? The qualities of this teacher are being associated with this subject, and that subject which was neutral to you earlier becomes associated with something that was positive to you. So it is a, sorry, unconditioned stimulus, UCS. And because you like this teacher, gradually, when this subject becomes associated with this teacher, you start liking this subject also, and hence this subject changes from neutral stimulus to sorry, not you, to conditioned stimulus, right? So this subject becomes associated with the teacher. This usually happens because they see many positive qualities in
Ma'am,
their teacher. Yes.
sorry to interrupt, but can you please tell little about your conditioning stimulus?
Yeah, okay. So,
Okay.
classical conditioning, we are basically talking about how we learn a behavior, right? It is typically about learning of a behavior. So, I will explain you this with an example. There is a dog, right? Now, if a bell is here, the dog has no response towards this bell. Okay, no response towards this bell. So this bell is a neutral stimulus. Why neutral? Because it is not eliciting any response in the dog. Again, this dog, when you present food to this dog will definitely start salivating. Why? Because it is food. It is a physiological response of the dog. So this food is a unconditioned stimulus, a stimulus that does not require any kind of learning. The dog doesn't need to learn salivating to food. It is a physiological response. It is happening automatically. So that is why it is known as unconditioned stimulus, also known as UCS. Now, if I ring a bell, and after ringing this bell, after say 4 or 5 seconds, I give food to the dog. After some days, the dog will learn that every time bell is there, food is given to me. So after some days, after this conditioning, the dog will start salivating on the sound of bell also, right? Because the dog is assuming that, okay, here is the sound of the bell, I'll be getting food in a few seconds. So the dog's body automatically starts salivating on the sound of the bell also. So this neutral stimulus becomes a conditioned stimulus. Why conditioned? Because the dog's body or the dog has learned to start salivating, which is a behavior, right? The dog has learned to behave to this neutral stimulus because this stimulus is attached with a unconditioned stimulus. All right. So food is your UCS. Bell before conditioning is a neutral stimulus, and it becomes a conditioned stimulus or CS after conditioning. Is this clear?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much.
So similar thing happens in this case. You have a certain liking towards a teacher. You have no liking towards, say, history subject. No liking towards it. In fact, you hate history because there is so much to learn. There is so much of cramming that is needed in history. So you don't like history at all. Now, if say this teacher has certain qualities, like she uses certain stories or uses a lot of flow charts to explain you the series of events that happened in the history, right? So you start liking that subject also. So this subject, which is, I am taking the example of history, becomes a conditioned stimulus for you. Previously, when this teacher was not teaching, it was a neutral stimulus. And unconditioned stimulus would be teacher, because you already have a liking towards how she teaches, right? So conditioning is happening in this case also. Why? Because history is being associated with the teacher. All right. So I'll continue. This usually
Yes.
happens. Yes.
Ma'am, are learning attitudes by association and halo effect related?
Mm, halo effect is okay. What do you understand by halo effect? First, tell me that.
Okay, till where I've read, till where I remember, halo effect is like when you meet someone, you like certain features about that person, and then you start liking everything about that person.
Mhm. Okay. Hal You are right, but not entirely correct. Halo effect is basically when we assume the related qualities, right? So, for example, say you have a boyfriend. Hmm? You know that this person is a honest human being, right? Because he is an honest human being, you also assume that this person will never cheat on you. Cheating on your partner and honesty are two different things, right? The person might end up cheating, but because he is an honest person, he may come clean to you that, okay, this is what I did. Both are unrelated things, but you end up assuming that because he is an honest person, he will never cheat on me. This is known as halo effect. where you actually assume some unrelated, not entirely synonymous qualities, but related. Honesty and cheating are not cheating, are a bit related, but are not synonymous, not the exact same thing. So we end up assuming some qualities about the person because they are related to a certain quality that he or she has. This is a halo effect. यहाँ पर association is not happening. What is happening is your confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is when we are basically being partial to someone in a good sense or in a bad sense, right? So you try to confirm yourself. You try to, what is happening here in this case is that you are trying to tell yourself that this person is the right person for me, right? So you end up assuming qualities that are related to a certain quality that you're sure about. That is not association. Yahan there is no neutral stimulus, there is no unconditioned stimulus, there is no conditioned stimulus. Getting my point?
Yes, ma'am.
Any other question related to this? If you have a doubt, you can ask me. It's okay. All right, I'll continue then. So, yeah, learning attitudes by association. This usually happens because we end up seeing many positive qualities in that teacher, and these positive qualities get linked to the subject that he or she teaches. Okay, here comes your answer again. If I assume qualities, I know 3 qualities about this teacher, and based on these 3 qualities, I assume one more quality. That is halo effect. In association, that is not what is happening. You are basically, because of these qualities, you are associating the same qualities to the subject also. So yahan your the stimulus basically changes from teacher, it becomes the subject. Here the person is same, your teacher or your boyfriend or anyone for that matter, right? Getting the difference between these two?
Yes, ma'am.
So because you see a lot of qualities in that teacher, you assume, you link those positive qualities to the subject also, and ultimately it gets expressed in the form of liking for the subject also. This is known as association, and through association we link two objects and form or learn an attitude. All right, is learning attitudes by association clear to everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
All
ma'am.
right. Now, the second way of learning attitudes is by operant conditioning, which is basically by being rewarded or punished. If an individual is praised for showing a particular attitude, chances are high that she or he will develop that attitude further. Whenever we show a particular attitude, if we are being praised or rewarded for that, then in response to that attitude, we end up behaving or viewing that particular person or event or topic in the same way again. For example, if a teenager does yogasanas regularly and gets the honor of being Miss Good Health in her school, she may develop a positive attitude towards yoga and health in general. Similarly, if a child constantly falls ill because he or she eats junk food instead of proper meals, then the child is likely to develop a negative attitude towards junk food and also a positive attitude towards eating healthy food. So, again, whenever we are being praised or rewarded for a certain attitude, we end up developing that attitude further, or you can say that the extremeness of that attitude increases. If we are on the other hand being punished for that attitude or for being or behaving in a certain way, we end up losing that attitude gradually, like the way it happened in this child. All right, he develops a negative attitude towards junk food because he is constantly falling ill because of that food. This is learning attitudes by being rewarded or punished. Next is learning attitudes through modeling. By modeling, we mean observing other people. Sometimes we may learn attitude by observing that others are being rewarded or punished for something. ठीक है, it is not just when we ourselves are being punished or rewarded for something. Even if we see that others are being rewarded or punished for something, we end up learning that same attitude because we can see that other people are either being praised or rewarded or being punished for doing a certain thing. An example is children learning to respect elders as they see their parents doing the same and being rewarded for it. So, if a child's parents respect their parents a lot and they are being praised for that, that child also may learn respecting his or her parents. So, learning may occur through observation or imitation of others also. Okay, as you can see, the father is folding the clothes here, so he is being rewarded by his mother or his wife. So this child also learns the same attitude of keeping his things in place or folding his clothes or whatever it is for that matter. Next is learning attitudes through group or cultural norms. So, as I said, we sometimes learn attitudes through group or cultural norms also. Now, what are norms? Norms are some unwritten rules that are followed by everyone belonging to a particular group or culture. So, the rules or the way a certain culture or a group of people or a society behaves, we end up learning those attitudes also. Over time, these norms may become part of our social cognition in the form of attitudes. All right. Although, if you look at it closely, you may understand that when we are learning attitude through group or cultural norms, यहाँ पर all the other three methods that we discussed previously are included, which is learning attitudes through association, through reward or punishment, and through modeling. For example, if you're offering money, sweets, fruit, and flowers in a place of worship, and it is a normative behavior in your religion, then you basically, and you also see other individuals doing the same thing. Okay, so you learn that attitude. So what is happening? Modeling is happening. Also, when you do this, you are being rewarded by your parents, so that is also happening. Also, it is because you are doing all this and you are being rewarded, you may end up believing in god also. So association is also happening. So when we are learning attitude through group or cultural norms, you are basically learning through either association or through reward or punishment or through modeling or imitation. When individuals see that such behavior is shown by others, is expected and socially approved, they may ultimately develop a positive attitude towards such behavior and associated feelings of devotion also. All right. So, whenever you are learning attitudes through group or cultural norms, you are basically learning through all the previous ways that we discussed. Any questions till now?
No, ma'am.
All right. Now, learning attitudes through exposure to information. This includes formation of both positive and negative attitudes through the information that is provided by various media, books, etc. An example can be by reading the biographies of self-actualized persons, an individual may develop a positive attitude towards hard work and other aspects as the means of achieving success in life. So sometimes through media or through books, we also develop a positive or negative attitude towards someone or towards something. A very an example of this can be what we all went through when there was this suicide case related to Sushant Singh Rajput. Because there was so much information that we were gathering from media, a lot of people developed a negative attitude towards his girlfriend because we were being feeded with a lot of information from the media, right? So sometimes we end up forming attitudes, either positive or negative, through exposure to information also. All right. Any questions regarding to exposure to information?
No, ma'am.
All right. Also, I would like to add here that when we learn attitudes through media, particularly, or books, particularly, it is very difficult to censor what information you are being fed, right? Sometimes that information might be manipulated, it might be twisted, or it might be it might not be true also. So sometimes we end up learning opposite attitudes because the information that we are being exposed to is not censored, it is not entirely true, or it might not be correct, right? Now, factors that influence attitude formation. There are some factors that influence the formation of your attitude. Here, the four main things are family and school environment, reference groups, the groups that you're referred to, your personal experiences, and media related experiences or media related influences. Family and school environment. Parents and other members of the family play an important part in our lives, and hence they end up shaping our attitude, right? Because in our younger stage of life, our parents and our other family members are such a huge or important part of our lives. A lot of our attitudes at that young age is formed because of what we are seeing in our home, or whatever we are observing in our home, or whatever we are learning from our homes. In the early years of life, particularly, family plays a major role. As the child grows up a bit and starts attending the school, it starts becoming an essential part of attitude formation. So after the age of 7, 8, 9, 10, there is a lot of influence from your school and peer groups also. Usually from family and school, the learning of attitude is either happening through association, or it is happening through reward or punishment, or it is happening through modeling. So in most of the cases, when we learn attitudes, or when family and school environment are influencing our attitude, it is because of either of these three influences, or sorry, these three ways. Second is reference groups. Reference groups are those groups that we belong to or we refer to, the groups that we engage in. These specifically include our, if we are young, then our friend circle. If we are a bit older, then probably our classmates, our batchmates, or if you're working, then your colleagues. These reference groups give us norms regarding acceptable behavior. It usually include attitude towards topics like politics, religion, national views, behavior, etc. The influence is important specifically during early adolescence, because during this phase of life, it is important for an individual to feel like belonging to a group. See, this early adolescence or even early adulthood, this is the time where we end up making a lot of friends and meeting a lot of new people in our life as we change schools or as new people join our classes. We end up forming relationships with them, and this is the time where we have this feeling of feeling of that we want to belong to a group or we want to be a part of that group. So because of that feeling, because of that need of belongingness with others, we end up forming a lot of attitudes through these reference groups also. यहाँ पर यहाँ पर again, learning of attitudes is through association and reward and punishment. It is not mentioned here, but it might also be because of observation. Right? If we see that like if there is a group of 10 people in your class, you are a part of this group, and you see that, sorry, and you see that out of these 10 people, there is one girl that is admired by all the other 9 people. You may develop attitudes like her because she is being accepted by everyone else and everyone likes this particular girl a lot. So you may end up developing attitudes like her. So it might be because of observation or imitation also. Just a second. Yeah, personal experiences. Personal experiences sometimes bring drastic changes in our life. Why? Because personal experiences are either rewarding or punishing for us. We end up learning a lot from our personal experiences, and because of these personal experiences, because these experiences are either too rewarding or too punishing for us, it brings a very drastic change in the way we perceive the world around us. An example can be an army man losing his other fellow mates in a war and hence develop a strong positive attitude towards companionship. All right. So because this was a very traumatic incident for this army man, he may end up developing a very strong attitude towards companionship or towards friendship. Usually, as I said, these experiences are either very rewarding or very punishing. When we are learning when personal experiences are influencing our attitude formation, we are basically learning through reward or punishment. Media related influences. Audio visual media and internet has become a very important source of information for all of us. Nowadays, even school going children, they are not relying on books, they are relying on media, Google, internet, etc. And because of this, because it is providing us a lot of information, it leads to attitude formation. Audio visual media, internet, school textbooks, etc. first strengthen the cognitive and affective component of attitude and are then manifested in the behavioral components. Because we are getting the information, first it is influencing our cognition. Through cognition, it is influencing our affective component, and through affective component, it is then influencing our behavioral component. Now, obviously, as I said earlier, also influences through media particularly, I'm specifically saying media and news, it can be both good or bad. It makes us better informed, but has no check on the nature of information and its quality. Because of this, there is no control over the attitude formation or the direction of change of the existing attitude. You cannot control that how your attitude is changing or how your existing attitude is directing towards a certain change. You might have a positive attitude towards a certain celebrity, and suddenly it may completely change because of the information that is being feeded to you through media, and this information might not be completely true. Now we have attitude change. Now, obviously, we form attitudes. We learned how we form attitudes and what are the factors that influence attitude formation. But sometimes we may end up developing attitudes that are wrong, or we may end up realizing that our attitude is wrong. We may develop maladaptive attitudes also. So it is important to learn that how these attitudes change. Okay? During the process of attitude formation and also after this process, attitudes may be changed and modified through various influences. Attitudes that are still in the formative stage and are more like opinions. So as I said earlier, opinions does not necessarily have a emotional and behavioral aspect added to it. So if the attitude is in the formation stage and it is not yet being manifested properly in your cognitive system, if it is at a formative stage or it is more like opinion, they are much more likely to change as compared to attitudes that have become firmly established. Right? If you have an attitude that is completely established, it is very difficult to change it. But if it is still in the formative stage and you're still learning, then it is easier to change that attitude. Now, the process of attitude change. There are three main concepts that help in the changing of attitude. First concept is the concept of balance by Fritz Heider. Second is the concept of cognitive dissonance by Leon Festinger. And third is the two-step concept by S.M. Mosen. The concept of balance by Fritz Heider. So the concept of balance can be understood with the help of a triangle. This triangle is known as a POX triangle. Here, P stands for the person whose attitude is being studied, right? The person on whom we are focusing to change the attitude is the P. O can be some other person, and X can be the topic or the person towards which the attitude is being studied. So say this is me, Agni. All right. O is some other person, say my student Simran. And X is, say, politics. Right? So an attitude changes if there is an imbalance between PO, OX and PX. If there is an imbalance between how I view Simran, how Simran views politics, and how I view politics. If there is an imbalance in this triangle, the attitude changes. Either I will change my attitude towards Simran, or Simran has to change her attitude towards politics, or I have to change my attitude towards politics, or Simran has to change her attitude towards me to maintain a balance here. Why this happens? Because this imbalance makes us uncomfortable, and to have that sense of comfort, we change the attitude towards balance. Either we will change it towards the other person or towards the X topic or person or whoever it is. Say, okay, let's say it's not politics, it is another student, Divyanki. All right, just a second. Now, there are certain conditions when an imbalance is there, and there are certain conditions when there is balance and no change is required. First, let us discuss when balance is there. Balance is there when all three sides are positive, or two sides are negative and one is positive, which means Avni, Divyanki, and Simran. So if two sides are negative and one side is positive, then also there is no issue. If all three sides are negative, say Avni, Simran, and Divyanki, all are negative, then also there is a balance. Let us discuss this. See, if this is me, this is Simran, and this is Divyanki. Me, Avni, has a positive attitude towards Simran. I like her. I like being in her company. I also have a positive attitude towards Divyanki, and Divyanki also has a positive attitude towards Simran. All three of us can hang out together. No imbalance is there, no change is required. Second condition, I have a negative attitude towards Divyanki, or Divyanki has a negative attitude towards me. She doesn't like me, I doesn't like her. Also, I have a negative attitude towards Simran, and Simran has a negative attitude towards me. We both don't like each other. Divyanki and Simran has a positive attitude towards each other. They like each other. So they can sit together and they can talk about me. Okay? Not an issue. Balance is there. Third thing can be, me and Simran don't like each other. Me and Divyanki also don't like each other. And Simran and Divyanki also doesn't like each other. No issues. Balance is there. All right. So if all three sides are positive, all three sides are negative, or if two sides are negative and one is positive, there is a balance. No change is required. Imbalance is there only in one condition, when two sides are positive and one side is negative. Say this is me, this is Simran, and this is Divyanki. Me and Divyanki have a good relationship. We both like each other. Simran and Divyanki also have a positive attitude towards each other. They like each other. But I don't like Simran and Simran doesn't like me. Now what will happen? Me and Divyanki might have a fight that why do you hang out with her when you know that I don't like her? Simran and Divyanki also might have a fight that why do you hang out with Avni when you know that I don't like her? So imbalance is there, right? Because I don't like Simran, she doesn't like me. But Simran and Divyanki have a good relationship, and me and Divyanki also have a good relationship. So it is uncomfortable for all three of us. She is being the moderator between me and Simran, and me and Simran have a problem with Divyanki because she talks to both of us, right? So it is uncomfortable for all three of us. In such a case, because an uncomfortable feeling is involved here, either I and Simran change our attitude towards each other, or Divyanki has to change her attitude towards either Simran or me. Then only a balance will be managed. All right. So this is how the Hyder's theory, Hyder's POX triangle works. Any questions regarding this?
No, ma'am.
All right. Next is the concept of cognitive dissonance by Leon Festinger. The cognitive components of an attitude must be consonant. That is, they should be logically in line with each other. So this is basically when a person has two cognitions regarding something, and these two cognitions has to be the same. If these cognitions are not congruent or are not consonant to each other, then there is a issue, right? So in order to solve that issue, we end up changing our attitudes. If two cognitions in an attitude are dissonant to each other or not consonant, then one of them has to be changed or will be changed in the direction of consonance. Okay? An example is, say I have a negative attitude towards pan masala, that pan masala causes mouth cancer, which can be even fatal. But another cognition, or you can say behavior, my behavior towards pan masala is that I still eat pan masala. Even though I know that it is wrong for my health, I still end up eating it. I still end up consuming it. So dissonance is here. Holding these two ideas or cognitions will make any individual feel that something is out of tune or dissonant in the attitude towards pan masala. Therefore, one of these ideas will have to be changed so that consonance can be attained. All right. Both balance and cognitive dissonance are examples of cognitive consistency. The first theory and the second theory, both are regarding cognitive consistency, that there has to be a consistency in our cognitions or in our behaviors or in our opinions. Cognitive consistency means that two components, aspects, or elements of the attitude or attitude system must be in the same direction. If each element does not fall in line with other elements, then the person experiences a kind of mental discomfort, like something is not right. And in order to deal with this mental discomfort, a change has to happen. A very good example of this is this image. बहुत बार you might have seen in movies or cartoons etc that we are thinking something, a devil is telling us something else and an angel is telling us something else, and we are getting confused. It is causing a sense of discomfort inside us, right? The angel is saying that you shouldn't be stealing the office supplies, and the devil is saying, what's the big deal, you deserve to get a few privileges. Sometimes it's okay, sometimes it's okay because you're working so hard, it is okay, you can enjoy some privileges. But the angel is saying that this is wrong, right? So a mental discomfort is there because you are being confused between the two thoughts. This is cognitive dissonance. And in order to deal with the mental discomfort that comes with this cognitive dissonance, we need to change our attitude, right? We have to change at least one of the cognitions.